Thorough criminal investigations usually rely on physical evidence that is submitted to a forensic laboratory for analysis. Belize's forensic lab now has a quality management system that requires investigators to utilize a request for analysis form to document in a standardized way what all testing is needed on specific evidence items or exhibits. This request for analysis form specifies the items that are being submitted to the lab, the desired tests or analyses to be done on each item, and the case details and narrative, all of which allows the lab to maintain comprehensive records of the thousands of cases processed every year for various law enforcement agencies countrywide.
Good morning. I brought a sexual assault kit for my case. I also brought the C-Chan request for murder investigation of John Doe. Okay, let me deal with the request form first to see if it's properly filled out, and then we will deal with your one. Okay, sure. Whenever you come to the National Forensic Science Service to submit any exhibits, there is a form that you have to fill out, namely the Laboratory Request for Analysis form. And this form is essential to specify what kind of analysis that the investigator or the case officer needs. The investigating agency is the formation or agency requesting analysis. Without this form, the exhibits will not be analyzed, since a written request from an investigator using the laboratory's designated form must be provided as a way of documenting the agreement for services between the laboratory and its client. The form is also used to provide accurate case information and context, including complexity, urgency, and suspected linkages. A request form, also sometimes called a requisition form, is standard practice at modern forensic laboratories, especially for laboratories that operate under a quality management system. It is important to note that the request for analysis form is a separate document from the police chain of custody, which is always submitted with exhibits and which contains similar information for the sole purpose of demonstrating who handled the exhibits and where and when the exhibits were transferred from one person to another in order to demonstrate the integrity of the evidence when examined in court. The laboratory request for analysis form begins with stating who the investigating agency is. For example, Precinct 1 in Belize City or San Ignacio Police Station. We also require the investigating officer's full name and social security number to enter him or her as a user in the Laboratory Information Management System, or LIMS. The social security number is not disclosed in any report and is typically only entered upon the officer's first encounter with the laboratory to drop off exhibits. Providing a phone number and email address is crucial for both the laboratory and the investigating officer. If no contact number is provided and if the laboratory needs to contact an investigator to clarify information relating to an exhibit or what type of analysis he or she is requesting, then the request may be placed on hold until the officer can get in touch with the laboratory. The email address allows for the laboratory to immediately contact an investigator the moment a report is finished to notify him or her that the report is ready to pick up from the laboratory. Soft copies of reports are not emailed out routinely, since an officer must sign out the report when picking up the original hard copy. The submitting officer is the officer submitting the exhibits at the laboratory, and not necessarily the officer making the request. The complainant victim will always be the victim. The investigator or case officer should not be entered there. The form requires the investigating officer to give an investigative narrative, which is similar to the brief of statement of facts that is on the chain of custody or can be gotten from SIMS. However, for more complicated investigations under the investigative narrative is where the investigator should specify the suspected associations to investigate and whether the case needs to be compared to another otherwise unrelated case. For instance, if it is a firearm being submitted as an arrest or gang membership incident, and the firearm needs to undergo a comparison analysis to a previous murder or shooting incident. In this section, the investigating officer should also specify each victim or suspect name, the URN for each case that is suspected to be associated, or the laboratory reference number if known. For DNA analysis involving multiple items, the investigator should specify the suspected linkages or associations between the submitted items,
so that it is clear to the laboratory staff where samples should be taken from for analysis. For instance, suspected linkages may be the victim's DNA profile on a machete, the suspect's DNA profile on a knife handle, or the victim's DNA profile on swab taken from a bicycle handle. It is also critical to ensure that reference samples or known samples are submitted from the suspect and victim when needed for comparison. Otherwise, the DNA analysis will not proceed. There are 5 lab sections listed on the form with different types of forensic analysis offered to clients. First, the serology and DNA section includes identification of bodily fluids, which are blood, saliva, and semen. This section is also where outsourced conventional DNA analysis is included. The second section, Rapid DNA, is a new service being offered at the lab. This section does rapid DNA analysis for identification of human remains and for investigative leads. These types of analysis are not to be used for court purposes. The third section, Analytical Chemistry, includes analysis to identify controlled drugs such as cannabis, cocaine, crack cocaine, ecstasy, methamphetamine, heroin, fentanyl, and other common illicit drugs. This section also tests for presence of ethanol only for public drinking cases. Outsourcing for fire debris analysis can be requested through this section. The fourth section, Toxicology, includes ethanol concentration analysis in urine and blood, as well as outsourced advanced toxicology to test for drugs such as cannabis, cocaine, sedatives, or poisons in biological samples such as urine, blood, or tissue. The fifth section, Firearms Ballistics, includes identification and classification of firearm and related components, which include ammunition and magazines. Comparison analysis of fired components, which is needed to make associations between 2 or more firearms or shooting incidents. IBIS entry and correlation review, which can provide information from the IBIS database concerning possible matches between other cases that are entered in the database. And trigger pull examination. The investigator should include the description of the exhibit as it appears on the chain of custody, under the laboratory section from which he or she is requesting analysis, and the investigator should also tick or highlight the type of analysis required. It is critical to specify the source of the exhibit, such as a victim, suspect, or scene, to ensure that evidence is properly accounted for in the limbs and items or individuals can be associated during analysis. The last section, after the form has been properly filled out, the final page requires the investigating officer, not the submitting officer, to sign the form to attest to making the request and to accept the terms and conditions of laboratory services. The exhibit management staff from the laboratory will then sign the form to acknowledge receipt and commence the process of opening a request in the LIMS for forensic analysis.
If you have questions on how to properly fill out the laboratory request for analysis form, you can call the lab at 205-2164 and ask to speak with the exhibit manager. The form is also available as an electronic and fillable PDF document. Thank you for your commitment to ensuring quality laboratory submission in support of criminal investigations.